Good evening, citizens of Portsmouth, invited guests, all in attendance, our city staff who is here present with us. Also want to welcome those who are joining us online or any other way to view this work session today. I want to recognize our city staff, our city manager, Mr. Carter, our city attorney, Ms. LaVonda Graham-Williams, and our city clerk, Ms. Deborah White. Also want to acknowledge my colleagues on council. Thank you all for being here tonight. And I would now ask is if we could all note our attendance electronically.
6 members of City Council are present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Carter, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, my colleagues on the dais, everyone that is here this evening. Have a couple items on the agenda that we will present this evening. But just before I do that, I'm going to ask Ms. Michelle Bradstock to stand. She is our new Behavioral Health Director. She comes to us from Chesapeake, and she's actually a native of Portsmouth. So welcome home, and thank you for joining our team. Thank you. Now for the presentations this evening, we have a couple of presentations from some outside firms that are here to talk to us. The first one is a Main Street City Council resolution request. That's going to be brought to us by the Portsmouth Partnership. Ms. Michelle Wynn is going to be the presenter for this evening. So Michelle, if you don't mind, please come forward.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, good evening. Thank y'all for having me. And I've also got Liz Pasqualini, who also works for the partnership, up here with me. And I think this is going to do the slides, right? Okay, perfect. So again, appreciate y'all having me, having us here present tonight our Olde Towne District Revitalization Plan and part of the Mobilizing Main Street Initiative. So just to give you a little history, I know some of you don't know some of the history about how this all started, but in August 2024, a group of restaurant owners, business owners, part of the Civic League, some city departments and different representatives throughout Olde Towne got together and started meeting to talk about Olde Towne, the need to get people back into Olde Towne to help revitalize some of the foot traffic and some of the energy that used to be back in Olde Towne. I'll try again. Is this? Okay. Are you just flipping it now? Okay. All right. Perfect. And then again, I'm going to apologize a little bit. So this is in a PowerPoint presentation, which y'all needed. This is actually a flip book. So I'm happy to send y'all the link because it's got some live links to it. And it also looks a little nicer. So anyway, I apologize for the way it looks because it is a flip book and it was not meant to be in a PowerPoint presentation. I'll go. Oh, I think it's working now. Okay. And then just some of the strategic partners that are involved in this. We've got the Olde Towne Civic League. We've got, like I said, a couple of city agents, city department heads with us. We have the Portsmouth Partnership. We've got the Civic League. And we also have a combination of businesses throughout the Olde Towne District that are part of this initiative. And we're looking at this for the district to define, as somebody in our board called it, the golden T. So we've got the waterfront that's being developed that is a huge opportunity for the city. We've got the innovation district that's also happening from the 700 block through like Effingham and down to MLK. And then we've got the High Street corridor. So when you look at the golden T piece, you look at that waterfront and High Street coming down to the innovation district and just the opportunity that's there to revitalize this corridor. So we've got infrastructure and money we know going into the innovation district with the RISE grant coming and the RAISE grant coming and all the pieces to that. We know that the waterfront is now starting to be developed, and so looking at that in-between space and the importance of it, and also all the assets that are there in this Olde Towne community. Again, up on the slide, but we've got historic homes, we've got commercial buildings, we've got pavilions, we've got museums, and just all kinds of amenities in this area to attract businesses, to attract people. And so, again, highlighting all of that and making sure that there's connectivity from the water all the way through. We feel that that's really important and in part of this process, and understanding all the assets that we have, and that all the draws that we have for people. And if you'll flip that side, and again, let's see if I can do it. Oh, no, it's working. It was kind of backwards, but if you can see, you've got the waterfront there, and then the Olde Towne district, and then you go back, and then that connects to the Innovation District. And again, it's hard because this is supposed to be together and not separated. And then the other piece that we were also identifying in these meetings are just brand presence. So I know the city is going through some brand awareness and some redefining of the brands. And so we also wanted to bring to the attention that Olde Towne really is a destination on its own and should have a brand awareness too. One of the reasons that we think that is because when people think of Olde Towne, they think of safety, they think of historic. It resonates with our residents, and it resonates with visitors. So we want to capture that, elaborate on that, and, really help the conversation move forward and be positive. When people talk about cities, they identify Virginia Beach, they identify Norfolk. They don't necessarily identify Portsmouth as the city like that when you're looking to travel. So really capture that brand and that Olde Towne piece. The other thing that we were looking at too is just a multi-generational appeal, right? Like, again, we want to attract younger groups to come to visit, also knowing to lean into the historic piece that we have. And so we've got a mixture of residents downtown, and so we want to make sure that we're really bringing amenities to help everybody that lives downtown, and then also to bring people into downtown. And then the other piece that was also identified is why now, like why is the time now? And one of the important things is the fact that we've got Rivers Casino that's bringing in hundreds of people into Portsmouth. So we need to give them somewhere, a place to visit and to stay and to enjoy the downtown corridor. Along with being at the casino and spending money there, we also want to make sure we're giving them places to spend money in this Olde Towne corridor. And also with Norfolk having their casino come on board, we're right across the river from that. So again, we want to make sure that we're attracting traffic from that casino back into Portsmouth, because that is going to be a new attraction. We want to make sure that Portsmouth receives some of that attention too. We're right across the water, and make sure there's synergy there. We want to make sure that we're creating a corridor with economic activity. So again, with all the investment that's going to go into the Innovation District, we've got the waterfront. We want to make sure that the whole corridor is connective and is active. We looked at different studies for different communities that have created this vibrancy downtown. And interestingly enough, before we even entered this Main Street piece, those cities that we were attracted to are U.S. Main Street cities. So that was kind of something that came out of this that was interesting as we were going through the process. We did not realize that. We just knew, like Greenville, South Carolina, we had visited it. It's warm, it's charming, it's on the water, it has lights, it has outdoor seating, it's clean. All the pieces that we thought defined a successful city, and you'll see that here when you look at Asheville, Greenville, and other communities. They all have a lot of things in common, and that's they've got colorful streets, they've got signage, wayfinding, they have events, they have outdoor dining, they're clean, they're well lit, and you feel safe. And so that was all part of this process, is Olde Towne should feel like this. There's no reason that we don't have all of these things in our community. And it should be walkable. And so as we were going through this process, we had this flip book and submitted it to DHCD. So back in October 22nd, when we realized that Virginia Main Street had expanded their population threshold. So that's a new tier that they had expanded. They used to not do any cities that had a population of under 75,000. So Portsmouth was always over that threshold. So we submitted our flip book from all of these conversations that we've been having with the community, and they immediately called us, had a meeting with us and urged us to apply for the Virginia Main Street program, and we got that application in by November 8th. So with the help of the city manager, with the help of some of our city departments and our mayor. So not only were we encouraged to apply, but they also, as y'all know, we did get accepted into the program, which is super exciting, but we also skipped a tier, which is super important because it's a 3-tier process. And so the first tier is Emerging Main Street, and we were already collectively as a group well organized. We have a nonprofit, we have leadership, we have staff that we were able to skip that first step, which is very important because the second step is the mobilizing, and that is the 2-year cohort that we would like the resolution to enter and to stay in, that we've already been accepted into. And this gives us state guidance, federal guidance to come up with a plan as to what, collectively the city and the private sector wants our downtown corridor to be. Like, what is the vision? What is the planning for it? And then it's a process. It's a 2-year process where we're tied to resources to help vision that, right? Without a vision plan, it's hard to make change, and it's hard to stay on track without a plan. And so this helps guide that plan and to create a pathway for change. And a pathway for investment. And after that 2 years, the goal would be then to apply and become an Advancing Main Street program, which is an accredited program, and then you're in with U.S. and all over the United States, and the marketing and the things that come to that as a U.S. Main Street program. And that would be the goal. It's the Main Street program in Virginia since '85 has had a phenomenal economic impact. So collectively, since 1985, it's created 8,200 businesses around the state of Virginia, 27,000 jobs, and generating more than $2.6 billion in public and private investment into these small towns, which I think is significant. And so again, to have Portsmouth be a part of that and that investment would be fantastic, I think, for the city and also for the community at large, even really for the region. We've got Hilton Village and Phoebus, who have both now gone through the mobilizing and are now in the advancing stage. And you can see some of the redevelopment that's happened in both of those areas. It's been quite significant. And you can look through all this around the whole state and see communities that have gone through this Main Street program. The transformation that's taken place in these communities are really phenomenal. And you don't have to look far to see them. And it's, like I said, it is a process, so everybody has to be patient with the process. Things take time, change takes time, and planning takes time, but when it's done correctly, you see the benefit of all of that. Their plan is a 4-pillar plan, so economic vitality, design, promotion, and organization are the pillars of the plan. And it requires a synergy approach, right? The private sector can't do it alone. The municipality can't do it alone. And I think that's what makes Main Street such an interesting concept, because it really is a private-public venture. It's a private-public partnership. And both entities and all involved have to have skin in the game. So it is, volunteer time, it's grant money, it's private funds, it's city funds. It all works together for sustainable change. The other thing that I love about this program is, yes, we're talking about the Olde Towne corridor, but that's just the beginning. So this is a program that's for the entire city. We're working with Olde Towne first because one of the things they stated in some of the programming that we've gone to, and even the 40th anniversary, that I thought was telling is, your downtown corridor, your main section is like the artery to, a heart. It's the main lifeline, to an organ, and that's kind of what you look at the downtown corridor, the High Street corridor for Portsmouth. It's the pulse, the heartbeat, and without that working, the whole rest of the city can't work either. You need a thriving downtown corridor for the rest of the city to be thriving as well. And so that's what this builds on. And so you take this and then you can use it for other areas in the city that need transformation too. I mean, Afton Square is a great example, what great bones that has, right? But it needs a plan. So you take this plan and you then put it into the grassroots function and people that are living in that area and that business community, and then you can grow that and take what we've learned from this, and that approach can be spread all throughout the city. So it's not just, one and done or just a small corridor. It really is transformational change for the entire city. And it's just, one community at a time. I was getting ready to say, we'll send this out, but there's a link to all kinds of information on the Virginia Main Street program with a lot of detail behind it. But what we're asking tonight is, I think before y'all, you have a resolution. Y'all can tell me how this works, but there is a resolution that we need. It is part of the Main Street program. It is a requirement. So like I said, they do not accept us without y'all, right? We're in partnership. This is not a one organization problem to solve. It is a collaborative effort where, council, your city government works with the private organization to make real change in your community. Yeah, I was going to say. Yep, that's all I have.
Does that conclude your presentation?
That concludes my presentation.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. Like I
Well,
said, I'm not used to this format. I apologize.
It's okay, we can help you with that.
Good, thank you.
Our first speaker is Councilman Tillage. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. When I first heard that we were applied for this and it was on the news, I was really excited to see that we are taking that initiative to really revitalize our city. The question I have is regards to the waterfront. So will this limit the city from any big developments? I see there's a lot of wording around revitalizing and preserving buildings. But of course, there are buildings that would need to be demolished in order for the waterfront to to reach its
Yeah.
best potential.
Many.
So would that, many, right?
Yeah.
So will that limit any of that from happening?
No, it is a historic preservation based, right? But when you've got something like the waterfront, again, you want to see that development mixed in with that historical preservation. It takes both to bring vitality back. So there are no rules as to what we can't do. It's just a tool set to use on creating your own plan and guidance. And that's the nice thing about this. It's developed for Portsmouth specifically, right? Because it's the vision of what Portsmouth wants to see.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm excited about this as well. Probably 10 to 15 years ago, Main Street proposal was done for Craddock area, but I think the lack of leadership at that time within the community didn't go anywhere. So it's exciting. I do have some questions. Are the boundaries restricted specifically to our boundaries for Olde Towne?
Yeah, I was going to say, you can answer.
Yeah, so I would start saying it's actually the city of Portsmouth that's been designated, right? So Portsmouth is a mobilizing Main Street community. And then we get to sort of define what areas we're going to focus on. And so I know there's a couple different boundaries that represent Olde Towne, and that's something we're sort
Has
of.
that been thought out thus far?
It's part of the conversation. We haven't nailed that down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, in complying with it, there's signage, there's renovations involved, perhaps demolitions. What happened? Does it require total buy-in from business owners within the boundaries of wherever Main Street is going to be?
Yeah, ideally, yes, absolutely. You want total buy-in from, everybody concerned. But again, if there's a business that's against being part of Main Street, we haven't run into that yet. We've kind of canvassed everybody, and we're focusing on, the downtown corridor as the first piece of this, right? Like I said, then you kind of take that template and work through other neighborhoods as they have their grassroots and their organizations to do that. So, but yeah, you need buy-in from everybody, really.
And you mentioned the timeline. It's two years to get organized, per se?
Yeah, so it's a 2-year cohort. We're a little further along than most in our cohort, just because, again, we've got a couple of people in the, couple of organizations in the cohort that aren't actually even a nonprofit yet. They're working on that status, so they're helping that. But so it's a 2-year program for mobilizing, and then you apply for the advancing. And the advancing then is that last tier, the last stage, and there's, of course, more opportunities for grants and pieces through the vitalizing, but there are some grant opportunities through the mobilizing as well.
And it mentions there would be a director. Is that director in the private sector, or is that director city employee?
The director's in the private sector. So for the first 2 years, there is no director because it's fallen under the Development Foundation. So Liz and I are the staff on that piece. But there's also no director requirement through the mobilizing. So the advancing stage is when there is a full-time director for Main Street that's required. And the model is under the nonprofit, not in the municipality.
Okay, very good, exciting.
Thanks.
Councilman Hugo, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I don't have any questions, I just have a comment. So I attended the Virginia Municipal League annual meeting last autumn, and one of the presentations that was made was done by the Virginia head of the Virginia Main Street program. I had enough chirping in my ear walking up and down Main Street, talking to Main Street business owners to have heard about the Main Street program, and so decided I'm going to go attend, find out what this is all about. So to address the Vice Mayor's question, the fact that they've concluded that we're skipping through the first phase, that's really the organizing phase. And my takeaway from the briefing that was done was that a lot of cities don't get out of the organizing phase to even get into the phase that we were kind of immediately enrolled into, which is this help phase.
Right.
And so for us to graduate into that phase straight away, have access to help, have access to grant funding, to actually go do some things that we know need to be done that will fit nicely into the waterfront development that we're right on the cusp of. So it all just kind of in my head lined up. And so then I left my business card, and the very next day I got a phone call the Virginia has regional directors for Main Street. So the guy who is our regional guy called me and said, "Hey, I'm passing through Portsmouth on my way back home tomorrow. Can you meet with me?" Well, things didn't work out, but I was interested. I said, "So why are you passing through Portsmouth?" He said, "Well, we have a meeting with Michelle Wren." I said,
There's
"Well,
this guy."
then you don't need to meet with me. You're already meeting with the right person." And so I appreciate that you all have kind of stepped into this role. We need the private sector to make this public-private thing work. And the fact that you all have mustered the folks up and down Main Street to get them excited ought to be a reason enough for all of us to be excited to skip past step one directly into step two. And as they pointed out, this is about the High Street corridor, because when you talk about where's Main Street in Portsmouth, 9 people out of 10 are going to say it's the High Street corridor downtown. But we have some other areas that kind of resemble main streets, like Afton Square and Craddock. And so we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We need to do this purposefully, one thing before another. And we're not ready as a group yet to jump into Afton Square and Craddock necessarily, but we are ready to jump into the High Street corridor, couple that into the waterfront development that the Economic Development Office and the EDA have been talking about. And so, again, I applaud the work that you guys have already done to get us to this point. and will encourage my colleagues when we get the opportunity to vote later on. This is definitely something that I think Portsmouth wants to support as a community.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Dotson, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. You guys are amazing at the partnership. Thank you so much for picking up and leading this initiative. My question is, you're asking us to buy into this program, to be part of the partnership. How often will we get updates or be involved? I'm hoping that they're at least quarterly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely, we can update y'all, well, we'll be meeting monthly, so however y'all would like updates is fine with us.
No, it's not. Can you coordinate that with the city manager and
Yeah.
see?
Absolutely.
Because if we're going to be part of the program, we need to see the measurement.
Absolutely.
Measurement's important, and if it's not reported, it doesn't do any good.
If it's not reported, it's not measured, right?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilwoman Thomas, ma'am, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you. Joined a little late, but I am familiar a bit with this initiative. We were all in Richmond, I think, for a training recently, and Chloe Rohde, I think, spoke about like kind of DHCD and some of the funding that's available for affordable housing, and I see that kind of ties into this. But my question is, how do you all work with, I saw one of the like frequently asked questions in this package. How do you all work with, I guess, Department of Planning in the review of the comprehensive plan to kind of tie the initiative and what will be developed with what the planning department and our comprehensive plan says?
Yeah, no, good question, and that actually has come up in, one of our meetings, because again, this is just starting the process, and we've got economic development that's serving on this, and so, would need to probably add a city planner on this too, would be beneficial for the conversation, so we don't have to keep going back to planning, so that they're part of the process. And then looking at what comprehensive plans are already out there, and then how can we use those to, integrate that into this plan, so it's one comprehensive plan that everybody's working off of.
Councilwoman Bryant, ma'am, you have the floor.
I can't let an opportunity go by. You know that Olde Towne is very, very special to my experience in the city of Portsmouth. And I want to thank you both, and the partnership, the businesses, the restaurants, everybody that's been involved. This is a really important project. I really, really look forward to seeing how it's going to bring this all together in terms of public safety, business growth, housing, all the things that we all agree that we want for our city and the direction that we know we are ready to take, even things down to art and more entertainment downtown. This is a really important project, and I love the idea of how it's fitting together 3 different zones and really creating this vibrancy that's going to thrive. And I thank you guys for your work. That I know it's going to be a long process moving forward, but I love that we're already in our second phase, and I have a lot of confidence in the people that are leading this. So thank you very much for leading this for us.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Councilwoman Thomas, ma'am, you have the floor.
Sorry, one more question. Thank you. So I think I heard you say earlier that the template that's going to be used for Olde Towne can then be designated to other neighborhoods within Portsmouth as part of once we get the designation, which I think is awesome, to not reinvent the wheel.
Right.
So will we have the, I guess, assistance to take that template to other communities? Will you all be involved in that as well, or is it kind of like phase 1 and then you're, not phase 1, but Olde Towne, and then you're on your own to kind of carry that out as a city?
Yeah, no, great question. And no, I mean, our idea would be to take the template and help and assist, definitely, because lessons learned, right? You go through the process and you learn a lot through the process, but it also needs to be activated in that community, right? So people who own businesses in that community, who live in that community, that's the important piece of that. So then helping them get the organizational pieces that they need to make sure that's happened. And then that way that voice is carried through. Because I think that's an important piece, right? Each community has its own identity. And so you want to make sure that you're true to that, and that you're not bring outside help in, but you also want to make sure that you're creating what that community needs and wants. So it's very individual.
Any more questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, then I have a few comments that I'd like to make regarding this program. First of all, I've done a lot of studying on it, and number one, I've been to one of the places that you identified, Columbus, Ohio, and I can tell you that, of course, we know there's a small school that resides in Columbus, Ohio, that has a whole lot of students that help that to grow. But to your point, I've seen it successful in a real life, real-time situation. And I think when you combine all of the assets and the resources that we already have in our city, we're a historic port, and I hope to be a people festival city. And I think that creates a real synergy and opportunity. The other thing I wanted to say on that, Mr. Carter and myself had a meeting with our military leadership here in the city of Portsmouth that are the heads of our military assets, Coast Guard base, the hospital, also the shipyard and other assets that are military. One of the things that we discussed, we do need more things downtown because, for example, we were just told today that when the carrier comes in, it has about 400 to 600 young people that need things to do. And although they live on the ship while it's in the dry dock, just an example, having activities, opportunities for them to come downtown, not just for food and drink, but to do other things. And so we want to be very innovative and proactive in creating those types of venues. And I know that this program has a component of that. But one of the things I did want to ask, the initial funding, I see the initial seed funding. I know there's some fundraising you all had to do. Where did you get most of your initial seed funding from?
Well, so far, we haven't had any seed funding at all. Like, so the partnership.
But I know that's a part of the program.
Yeah,
You have to
and-
raise some funding.
Yes.
So where do you intend to get it from?
Well, good question. So again, with the grant process, so there'll be grants written. We are carrying, we have a grant writer for the partnership. So the partnership pays for a grant writer. That's how we were able to get this done so fast as well, because we have a professional grant writer. So that'll help in this process. And then private funding from the community, and then also, the city buy-in as well. So it'll be from all three sectors.
Good, but this ultimately, I think, has the potential, once we get this thing moving in the right direction, to do some really important things. And I agree with my colleagues that we should transfer this model to other communities. One of the communities I know that we've talked about for years, and I've heard about on this council, as well as Craddock, the Truxton community, which is as much old as Craddock is, can use some help in that regard. I get it. We need to do one thing before we take on five. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. So I'm excited about the potential of what this can do for our city. I've seen it work in other cities. So thank you all for your efforts and your work that you've put in thus far. We look forward to moving forward.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Carter, so you have the floor.
Thank you, Michelle and Liz. That was a good presentation. Thank you for your time. Next on the menu is Mr. Greg, and I'm going to mess your name up here. Let me put my glasses on so I can make sure I say it right. Grutendorf. Did I get it right? Close enough, all right. I can definitely say Miss Nikki Johnson, but they're here to provide an regional economic outlook for our region. So, Greg, Nikki, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Carter, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council. I'm just going to take a second because this is really Nikki's show, but I just wanted to talk to you all very quick about the Planning District Commission and the Transportation Planning Organization. We're fortunate enough to have the mayor serve as our chair on the Planning District Commission, and Mr. Carter on the board as well as Chief Administrative Officers, and Ms. Thomas serves on the Transportation Planning Organization. We work with a lot of your staff. Mr. Olde Towne is the chair of our Citizens Advisory Committee, and we work with staff such as Ms. Russell and Mr. Donahue over there in our organization. But essentially what we do is we convene and collaborate and work together as the region in Hampton Roads, and we try to bring the local governments together on issues of consensus, regional collaboration, cooperation, any places where we can connect. The Planning District Commission is the umbrella organization, so it serves as a fiscal agent for the Transportation Planning Organization, but we have a variety of programs, and we reach out really in Hampton Roads and really try to connect the localities as best we can in areas where there's mutual benefit. So there's a lot of information sharing that takes place at the staff level. We really work hard to connect locality staff so they can share best practice. On the Planning District Commission side, we have emergency management, environmental education, housing and human services, planning and economics, as well as water resources. Those are the main program areas. And that includes resiliency. On the transportation side, we have long-range and rural transportation planning, transportation improvement planning, performance management, and multimodal programs. So all the transportation planning for the region takes place from the board members that serve for the TPO. So I just wanted to provide that background, and then across both programs, we have public participation, equity and inclusion, civil rights, and Title VI. That serve the PDC and the TPO. So I just wanted to provide that background, and thank you for your time, and I will turn this over to Ms. Johnson.
Good evening.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, you have the floor.
So I'm here today to provide just a brief overview of the latest trends in the economy over the past year and discuss prospects for future growth for 2025. So starting with the national economy continues to show incredible resilience. If you think back just to 2022, majority of economists were actually predicting a recession was looming. Yet in 2023, inflation-adjusted GDP outpaced the prior year's growth. Now, we have seen a slight slowdown in 2024. However, if you compare to the average annual growth observed in the decade prior to the pandemic, we're still well above that. And so what this is signaling is more of a normalization to those pre-pandemic trends rather than an impending downturn. We also saw significant moderation in inflation over the past few years. If you think back in the summer of 2022, at the peak, prices were up 8% year over year. They have come down considerably. By the end of 2023, we were already near 3% inflation rate, but we have seen a stall over that last year. So in 2024, by December, we were at 2.9% for all prices. If you see there is like a little slight uptick for that latest month, that was mostly driven by food and energy prices. You know, the bird flu is affecting eggs and a lot of other foods. And so we are seeing a lot more volatility. But if you look at the light blue line, that's core inflation, which excludes the food and energy, that remains solid over that last year. But overall, what we're seeing is the Fed's goal of that 2% target is proving a little bit longer than expected. But we do believe that we're still moving in that direction. Now, despite sticky inflation, we have seen wage gains at the national level outpace inflation for the last 18 months. And that has really helped to boost consumer spending, which has been the main driver of our economy over the last few years. And so we see here in Hampton Roads, retail sales through October were up year over year. We're still well above those pre-pandemic levels. We also know that if we look at labor markets, they have stabilized significantly over the last year. In Hampton Roads, the civilian labor force and employment levels recovered from the pandemic fully by early 2023. However, in 2024, there is that slowdown. However, if you compare it to the 2019 levels, we're still slightly above or in line. And we see a similar trend occurring in Portsmouth. And so here we see civilian labor force and employment in the city of Portsmouth shows the same trend. Recovered fully from the pandemic by early 2023. Over the last year, we've seen a slowdown. This data is just through November. However, just the other day, we saw December numbers get released. And so if we look at total throughout the entire year, labor force growth in the city is slightly above 2019 levels. So once again, as we saw with economic activity, this is signaling that normalization to pre-pandemic trends. Now, what we have seen is that in this elevated interest rate environment, firms are more cautious when it comes to hiring and expansion, but they have been hesitant to fire. And so what that means is that at the national level, hirings have fallen to the lowest levels in more than a decade, but layoffs have remained relatively stable. And so that has had some impact on unemployment rates. We have seen a slight uptick over the last year. However, once again, if you look, we're still right around those 2019 levels. The latest for November that you see here, Portsmouth unemployment rate is 4%, which is a little bit above the average for the region. However, that was true even prior to the pandemic, but the city still falls slightly below the US. And growth over the past year is slightly slower compared to the national average. Job growth, we also see a similar trend that has slowed. So the region recovered all the jobs that it lost during the pandemic by early 2023. Slower growth over the past year. However, that growth was still above those pre-pandemic rates. And what is interesting about job growth here in the region is that what we saw prior to the pandemic, in the decade prior, we know that Hampton Roads usually had slower job growth relative to the nation. That was due in part to the defense sequestration of 2013, which really slowed the recovery in the region from the Great Recession relative to other areas. And so we had slower growth relative to the nation before the pandemic and in the initial aftermath, but over the last year, we've seen that job growth nationally has decelerated faster than the region. So as of December 2024, we see that jobs were up 1.7% in Hampton Roads compared to 1.4% nationally. If we look at the largest gains in job growth over the last year, we see that's been concentrated in services, which should be no surprise considering the change in pandemic trends that we saw over the last few years. The largest gains were in professional business services and then healthcare and education. We did see government jobs increase year over year, but they have yet to recover from those 2019 levels. Leisure and hospitality did make a full recovery in 2023, and it is up year over year. However, we are seeing somewhat of a slowdown in the tourism industry in general. If we look at hotel revenues over the last year, we can see that they have slowed significantly. And I think this is in part due to a national trend, this bifurcation in hotel performance that we're seeing. With sticky inflation, what we're seeing is that the demand for travel among lower and middle income households has slowed. And yet at the same time, we're still seeing strong demand in the luxury markets. And so this bifurcation, of course, is going to affect Hampton Roads a little bit more than other areas, which is why we've seen a slightly higher deceleration compared to national or Virginia hotel revenues. Defense spending. So we saw in 2024 defense spending in Hampton Roads increased to about $14.6 billion. That was the third straight year of increases. We also see that for the first time in more than 3 years, we exceeded those pre-pandemic levels. We know that defense spending authorized for 2025 is expected to grow, but we also know that the timeline of appropriations remains very much in question. If we turn to the housing market, we know that we've seen a lot of turbulence over the last few years. We saw a significant surge in home sales in those initial 2 years of the pandemic, and then a significant decline. However, we did see a slowdown of that decline in 2024. Homes sold in the region were roughly in line with the previous year, but we're still well below 2019 levels. We're actually still around levels last seen in about 2016. We see a very similar trend for Portsmouth. We see that at the peak, number of homes sold in 2021 is 2,461. The latest for 2024 were about 1,697. So still below those 2019 levels, but the city of Portsmouth actually rebounded a little bit faster than the region. Where the region was roughly in line with the previous year, we see a slight increase in the city of Portsmouth, which is positive news, but still yet to reach those pre-pandemic levels. If we want to know why, home sales have declined so significantly, we only have to look at mortgage rates, right? We saw that they peaked in 2023 at about 7.6%, started to come down, but then we saw a little slight uptick over the last 6 months or so. So this is as of January 2025, mortgage rate was 7%. What we're seeing is this lock-in effect, especially for existing home sales. So if you bought a home in 2021 at 2.7%, we know that the majority of mortgages sold today are fixed rate mortgages, they're not adjustable. So if you sold your home, if you bought your home with a 7% mortgage, you're now facing 7%, which means that you're less likely to sell. You might want to hold off. And so that has really slowed home sales, both nationally in the region and in the city. And we know that at the same time, new construction has not kept pace. So new construction of homes was down before the pandemic. We never recovered from the Great Recession. But now we see over the last year a continued decline in the number of building permits issued within the region. And of course, the elevated interest rate environment, high cost of construction has continued to weigh on these trends. But if you have less existing home sales, you have not enough new construction growth, that means the inventory of homes available for sale has remained low. So if you look in the, right before the pandemic, in February 2020, it would take about 2.9 months to sell off all of the existing inventory of homes for sale in the region. At the bottom, at the trough in 2022, it was about 1 month. That was a historic low. As of December 2024, we're about 2.2 months, still below those pre-pandemic levels. And so what does that mean? If we have an insufficient supply to meet demand, it's going to continue to push up prices. And that's what we've seen. So the typical value of a home in the city of Portsmouth since February 2020 to December of last year is up 48.7%. Now, what's interesting is the U.S. actually saw faster growth in the initial few years of the pandemic. However, the city and the region has accelerated over the past year slightly. I don't think that there's enough change here to really tell a story. We need to have a few more months of data to really see what's going on. But if you look over the past year, we see that the typical value of a home is up 8 percentage points in Portsmouth and 6 percentage points in Hampton Roads, and it's actually down 4 percentage points nationally. So we are seeing faster growth here, and it's a factor of a lot of trends, so it's hard to really parse out immediately. We need to see how population trends and if there's different levels of new construction going on nationally relative to here, but we are seeing faster growth over the past year. We are also seeing a similar trend with rents. We see that between February 2020 and December 2024, the average rent is up 43% in Portsmouth compared to 41.8% in Hampton Roads. Both of those are well above the national average, but this was also true prior to the pandemic. We saw slightly faster rent increases here relative to the nation. So, with everything going on in Washington, forecasts are futile right now, really. Uncertainty clouds economic forecasts, and there is a lot of uncertainty. But what we can say is that the fundamentals of the economy remain strong. And that's what we're looking at moving forward. Now, there is a lot in question if defense spending, based off of the National Defense Authorization that we see for 2025, if that remains, we do expect that defense spending to continue to boost the economy here in the region, but there is a lot in question. We know that with inflation stalled and labor markets stabilized, the Fed chair reiterated today he sees no reason to further cut rates, so we are facing a higher for longer interest rate environment. With low inventories and high prices, we're going to continue to see that affordability crisis that we've been facing for the last few years. We have to increase supply in order to meet demand. A lot of uncertainty moving forward, but as I mentioned, the fundamentals of the economy remain strong. What's going to happen this year? I have no idea. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, you can see my email at the top there. You can also see there's a lot of different ways to connect with the PDC if you are interested. Thank you.
Excuse me, Nikki, if you could just remain. My colleagues on council, anyone have any questions for Ms. Nikki? Councilman Dodson, sir, you have the floor.
On your sheet where you say Hampton Roads retail sales,
Yes.
that sheet from 2020 to 2022 shows a 20% gain in retail sales post-pandemic. Can you give some insight as to what drove that?
Now, some of that is due to the Wayfair decision that increased the sales tax on online, so you do see kind of a structural break there. But what happened in the region is not that different than what happened nationally. We saw a huge shift in sales during the pandemic. Even though services were shut down, we saw a drive in demand for goods, and so you still did see a surge in retail sales. This is not unique for the region.
Do you know what sales of what was it just general sales, or was there something specific?
Well, what you saw during the pandemic is when all the service sectors shut down, you saw a shift to durable goods, right? So people were online shopping. And then on top of that, you saw the stimulus, which also boosted retail sales during that time. And so it was those two things confounded, does that make?
Thank you.
Councilman Hugel, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So thanks for a very comprehensive brief. I think your summary that it's confusing times is maybe an understatement.
Yes.
So I'm looking on slide 12, which is the change in industry employment slide, the bar graph. It's hard for me to identify which bars point to, I'll call it blue economy hiring, the maritime world, the shipyards, the port, wind, those industries that I think we're spending a lot of time talking about in Portsmouth, trying to encourage Portsmouth neighbors to pursue trade skill development, whether it's in our CTE program at the high school level or skilled workforce training at the community college level. And so I wonder if there's a way for you to tease out of here what the maritime blue economy job growth change is. My suspicion is that even if you're able to do that, it will be understated to what it could be if we had more people ready to go into those jobs, because I think across the board we have demand signal to hire and we don't have people ready with the fundamental building block trade skills to go into that work without the employers having to start from ground zero. And so while I'm on that topic, I'll put in a plug for Portsmouth at Work. So we do have a program here in our Economic Development Office to do workforce development that's geared to really any kind of trade skill that you want to learn. So whether it's the maritime skills, the health services skills, cyber skills, we're not picky. There's a lot of demand signal for all of those skilled trades that don't require a college education, don't require incurring debt for a college education. But I guess my punchline to all this is, when we're in confusing times, it's really good to have a good job, and those are good jobs.
Absolutely. We know that we really struggle for workers in those industries. That industry is not broken out here because these are two-digit sector, but I can provide you with those numbers. We can break down shipbuilding. We also have access to some data that can look at openings and gaps in wages within certain industries. So I'm definitely more than happy to provide you with some of that
Okay.
data.
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
And Ms. Johnson, that would absolutely be helpful to provide to all of us. And once we get it, we'll get it to everyone. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, just based on your expertise and knowledge, of course, housing, and certainly you don't build houses in a day. And you know, the housing stock, as you had shown, that's a big issue for our region, not just for the city of Portsmouth. I think we did relatively well in terms of new housing that is being built. But what is your insight on, is it going to take another 18 to 24 months to even see that move realistically? Or is it just we're going to have to monitor it? We need more housing. We've got to get these rents to come down, because a lot of our young people and our seniors are paying a lot more for rent today, as you know.
Absolutely. And I just want to start by saying, the affordability crisis, the housing shortage, it's not just a regional issue, it's a national issue. So there's a lot of different regions facing this issue, and we know that it's all due to the chronic undersupply of housing. We're just not building enough. Now, we have high interest rates. We know that the cost of construction is very high right now, especially in these uncertain times. To give a timeline of how that will change is very difficult, because it's a wild guess at this point, right? But I do think that different regional approaches have been done to really make concerted efforts to increase housing supply. I know that at the PDC, we're working on our regional housing assessment to help to provide tools to increase supply. And so anything done on that front to really look at where the gaps are, where we can increase, that's the main issue moving forward, because we have to have real action. There needs to be really a plan in order to increase. If we just continue to do what we're doing, I think with the inflation pressures, with the price pressures, it's only going to continue to decline when it comes to new construction especially.
Right, and not to put you on the spot, but as a continuation of that, what can a city do? And I don't expect you to have the answer, but I would like to know from your insight, what can we do as a body? What should we be focused on, if there's a terminology for that?
So one thing that economists really want to harp on is to increase supply and not just focus on workforce housing or housing for disadvantage. And I don't mean to discredit that at all. That is incredibly important. We have issues with affordability, but the best way to really tackle affordability is to increase supply. And so there have been plenty of studies that even when you increase supply in higher income neighborhoods, it still does benefit lower incomes because they cycle through. Regional housing, local housing assessments, regional plans, of course, but local plans as well. So any type of strategy to really look at where the gaps are, I think is important. We're still developing that toolkit. So if you ask me in a year, I might have some better answers for you, but we're still looking through that. But it does have to be, it can't be business as usual, I think, is what we hear a lot.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Councilwoman Thomas, ma'am, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much. This is a great, just a lot of information that I think is useful to help us kind of determine the pathway for our city as we make decisions and what will drive some of those decisions. And the mayor asked some great questions around like housing, and Councilman Hugel asked about, the workforce, I think the slide 12 with the workforce breakout. And so you just mentioned a strategy of just increasing supply, whether it's affordable or workforce. And I'm always conflicted. Do we focus on having jobs for people to pay for the housings, which then creates affordability? Or, and I think that's why Councilman Hugel's request for the breakout would be very helpful, so that we can identify those gaps, that we can focus on, increasing those workforce opportunities to then tie into the overall affordability, whether it be workforce affordability, just affordable housing disadvantage, or just overall supply. So I'm always confused on the chicken or the egg. Which one do you focus on first? So thank you for that. If you have any insight, that'll be helpful.
I was going to use that same analogy, and it is hard to break that out, but we do know that people move usually when they have the job first, right? And so usually they have the job and then they look for the housing, but a lot of that comes together. And so if there isn't adequate housing to meet whatever open position that is, then they're going to look for another job. And that's where affordability comes in. And it is important to remember that affordability does not just mean a housing price. It's relative to your income. So our housing might be cheaper than it is in Northern Virginia, but if you look relative to incomes, we actually have a higher share of residents who are housing burdened. And so that's really important to think too. We need to make sure that we target industries for growth, for higher wages, push for higher wages within the region, which have been chronically lower than other areas. But we also do need to increase supply. And it's really, the jobs are here. We know that the jobs are here, and when we're looking for people is part of that gap that we don't have adequate housing, or that the housing is too expensive relative to whatever income they're offering.
Councilwoman Bryant, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to go back to a point that you just made that ties into this and make sure I'm understanding it clearly. What I heard you say was basically any housing is good housing. We want to create housing at any level, and it will have an impact as it sort of spreads out. As we look to develop the waterfront, the innovation district, revitalize our downtown, I just want you to touch on that a little bit more. We obviously are very attuned to the need for affordable housing, and there's a lot of discussion about it within our city. And I would just like you to comment a little bit more about that as we potentially look to build different levels of housing and their affordability. Thank you.
So as an economist, we are all about supply and demand. And so that's what it really comes down to. If I increase the supply of housing, I'm going to see lower price, right? So overall, we find that if you target different housing just for workforce or just for lower wage, that can slow actual growth. And so what we want to do is just increase housing. Any type of extra burdens that you add can slow the construction, but also cause, I think can cause issues when it comes to getting people in. So the real issue is just how can we, the fastest way, increase housing to decrease the price? It's just to build more houses, no matter what they are. And so we have seen studies, there have been international studies that have looked at, even if you build more high-income houses, people do move from lower income up, right? And so that then increases an open house for the middle income. And so it's all about just increasing supply. And so we as economists are all about reducing regulatory burdens to help move faster, right? And so all those things factor into that. But it really just is supply and demand dynamics. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. We really appreciate your information.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Carter, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for that really informative presentation. I've heard her speak before at the PDC, and I'm always impressed with her ability to interpret these things and then regurgitate them in a way that makes sense to people. So really, you did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate you. That concludes the things that I have on the slate for tonight, Mayor. We do have a couple items on the city manager's report as we're coming into the regular agenda. The Problem Gambling Prevention Fund. We're going to look to accept some money from the Virginia State of Behavioral Health to help facilitate efforts to address problem gambling. And also we have a donation for a canine training apprehension suit. So both of those items are what we have slated for the city manager's report for this evening, along with a public hearing for the honorary street name designation. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. We have now come to the agenda item for a work session of council liaison reports. Do we have any council liaison reports? Councilman Hugel, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. A couple things to report tonight. The Crime and Gun Violence Task Force met a week ago, Monday, the 3rd of February. Our agenda focused on Chief Jenkins updating on current crime stats, and then Ms. Matthews providing the task force members with some details into what's happening with the Portsmouth United initiative. In particular, she spoke to the development of the communication app with the goal of providing one-stop shopping for our neighbors to get information on a variety of things. And so we'll be monitoring that progress as she and her app team continue that development. Additionally, we spent some time talking about the Bloomberg-Harvard study that was done a couple of years ago regarding crime and gun violence in the city. At the next Crime and Gun Violence Task Force meeting, which is Monday, the 3rd of March, we anticipate having the fire chief deliver an update on where the city Bloomberg-Harvard Task Force kind of paused their action from a while back. And additionally, we anticipate delivering the health department assessment that was provided to City Council back in the autumn. A very comprehensive look at a bunch of elements, including the impact of health on crime and gun violence, to level set the task force members with information. We're doing all of that in anticipation of hiring the consultant that we have the request for proposal on the street for now. That consultant, once hired, will provide expertise and lessons learned to the task force members as they step into their real chore, their real task, which is to develop the integrated plan to address the systemic issues underlying crime and gun violence. Secondly, I had a chance to attend a discussion about the resiliency study that's being conducted by the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. So that was held at Norcom High School a few nights ago. This study is done in collaboration between the city and the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. It's aimed at addressing floodwater resiliency from the effects of tidal issues and also from the increasing impact from our rainstorms. In particular, along the main community corridors that serve our military installations, the shipyard and the hospital. So those corridors are the Effingham Corridor, Portsmouth Boulevard, Frederick Boulevard, Victory Boulevard, and George Washington Highway. I share all that because the turnout was pretty sketchy, me and 3 others from the entire community. And so this study group is looking for feedback from neighbors regarding the impact of stormwater and tidal flooding, particularly along those corridors as they're developing the preliminary designs on how to address dealing with that kind of water in those travel lanes. And so the good news is, even though there are only 4 of us there from the entire community, there's a way for the community to provide feedback. And it's been advertised by the city on Facebook, but I just want to, for the benefit of our neighbors who might be watching tonight, if you go to the city website, www.portsmouthva.gov, /OLDCC. That's the code to get you to the survey to provide your feedback and comments regarding resiliency along those corridors. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Bryant, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Thomas and I both were able to attend the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting in the end of January, and it was reported that the Cavalier Manor Rec Center is on time with its renovations and expected to be complete in March. The same contractor will then begin the J.E. Parker Recreation Center renovation beginning in April is the estimate. And both centers will be significantly improved in terms of lighting, paint, exterior work, floors, etc. The department reported also that the Holiday Music Festival and the Holiday Nights at the Park events were very successful with increases in attendance, and online ticket sales overall helped the visitor experience this year. The department collaborated with schools, city departments, local businesses, other community organizations, and that all contributed to making the events highly successful. I also attended the Behavioral Healthcare Board meeting this week, where we welcomed the new director, Miss Bradstock. As Mr. Carter said, she's a Portsmouth native, so that was a very nice reception. The department recently launched in December a new program. It's the Children's Community Crisis Stabilization Service. It's for children ages 5 to 17, and it's going to create a comprehensive, holistic approach to care. The coordinated effort is aimed at reducing time spent in the hospital or in juvenile detention centers. It gives parents information and tools to support their children, and it's already received 26 referrals in the first month, with 20 of those cleared, so it is clear to the department that there's a need for that program. And that's all for me.
Councilman Dodson, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. I attended the retirement committee meeting. The projection was that for the work they're doing, they're relatively on course for the returns that they are projecting for the future. But they want to revise the projections for growth from a little over 7% to down to 6.9%, which takes the 80% and the full funded dates way out into the 2030s. The retirees, in return, have expressed some concern that they haven't received cost of living or raises from this plan in over 20 years, and want us to strongly consider talking about that issue during our budget hearings and coming up with some sort of resolution for that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I want to share with everyone, I had the privilege to attend last week the beginning of college. I went back to school. And what I've gone back to school to do is called the Mayor's Institute on City Design. It's the Just City Mayoral Fellowship, and it is taking place at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University. Also, a couple of our leaders in the city are going to be joining me at school. It's going to be our city manager, Mr. Carter, and our director of planning and zoning, Dr. Russell. The whole idea is going through this program with 8 other mayors throughout the country. This is the 5th cohort. We're going to be looking at development and housing opportunities with an emphasis on justice and equity as a part of the design process. It's really fascinating stuff. And one of the things we will be required to do, because we'll be in school until April. So every week we'll be going to class online, and we as a team will develop a program and a presentation. And I've identified our innovation district as the project that we as a team will work on in the month of April when we go for our presentation to the entire group. We'll be at Harvard. Mr. Carter and Dr. Russell will be joining me, and we will report on how successful we are. But the ultimate benefit of this program is going to provide us with some consultation and professional resources that will help us and aid us in making a more just community in all of our communities. And as we continue to go through these 8 weeks, I will share information periodically, as will, I'm sure, Mr. Carter and his team will. But it's exciting stuff, and we're grateful that we were selected as one of the 8 mayors throughout the country to participate. So stay tuned. And that concludes our reports for liaisons report. And now I will ask our Vice Mayor to read our closed meeting motion. We do have a need to go into a closed session. So Vice Mayor, could you please read the closed motion.
I move to go into a closed meeting, A, pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711, A8, for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel employed by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, specifically regarding the Port of Virginia. B, pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A1, for the purpose of discussing the city manager's contract.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote electronically.
This item is adopted 7-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are in closed session. Council members, we do have a need to come out of closed and read the certification. So if I could ask Vice Mayor Moody to please read the certification to come out of closed.
I hereby move that each council member certify that to the best of his or her knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and two, only public business matters that were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote electronically.
The motion is adopted 7-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That concludes our public work session. We will reconvene at 7:10 with our regularly scheduled council meeting.